Welcome, everybody. You are getting Lost in Plot, the show where we focus on story first, but not exclusively, across the mediums of film, television, video games, really anything with a story. I'm Wade, that's my brother Jake, and today we have for you the graphic novel, Die. Let's go get Lost in Plot. Now, there are spoilers incoming. Here we go. In the 90s, 6 British teenagers disappeared into a fantasy role-playing game. Only 5 returned. 30 years later, these broken adults are dragged back to discover the game isn't finished with them yet. So Die Volume 1 Fantasy Heartbreaker includes the first 5 issues of the series. Now, Issue 1, titled The Party, does all of our setup. The narrator of this story is Ash. On his 16th birthday, he gets together with some pals to play a role-playing game, and just like Jumanji, they all get trapped inside, in this case for 2 years. Solomon is the character who doesn't make it back out. So 30 years later, he's found out a way to bring all the others back into the game. So in the second issue, which is titled Players, they smartly explain all of the characters' role in the world of Die, as well as their special abilities. Dungeons is the third issue and has the group traveling across a war zone to try and find Solomon. Now, he's become the ruler and grand master in the world of Die, but the only way that they can escape back to the real world is all together. So they have to find him, convince him that they should all leave. Now, the fourth issue is called The Inn, and this one might have some of the best writing of the entire story arc in this one. Finally, issue number 5, the last issue, it's called Premise Rejected, has them bait Solomon into a final encounter where they hope to convince him to leave the game, but, well, things go tits up. And that's our plot for Die Volume 1 Fantasy Heartbreaker. That's right, things do go tits up at the end, and it's kind of an interesting twist that I wasn't really expecting to get, and was happy to receive. Now, they still use that term, right? You've been across the pond. I've been across the pond. Nobody was bold enough to say that term to me. You're welcome to. But yeah, that's the story. That's the setup. I agree with you. My favorite by far was The Inn. The Inn. And all the character interaction and the writing in there was really Now, this something. Is the one where all of them kind of hunker down in Glasstown, which is literally like a snow globe village within no man's land, within a giant war zone. A sanctuary of sorts. And you would think it's kind of a breather, because there's not a whole lot of action driving things forward. It's a little bit more exposition, but the character development and the stories in that are so rich and so memorable. It's probably the most memorable moments of these first 5 issues. Yes. That I thought it was just fantastic. But I mean, this is absolutely a derivative of Jumanji, and that's fine. I think they are done so differently, and Jumanji was like a kid's board game, and even the remake of Jumanji was like video games, and this is a RPG, which I don't have much experience with. That whole kind of trend passed me by. I don't know, did you ever play an RPG? No, loosely familiar with the concept of Dungeons and Dragons and how it's played. Yeah, and that's really what this is based on. Mm-hmm. Really interesting, though. I feel like I might have missed something, but hey. Well, this makes me think that I missed something, and the entire time I'm reading it, it's just like, who's writing this? Who does The Inn? Yeah. And that's the perfect segue. So let's find out who wrote this.
That's right. Now, say my name.
Talking about who wrote this, we've got Kieran Gillen. Have a look at some of his notable credits. Now, I couldn't fit everything on one slide because he's written for almost all the big properties out there. He's written for Young Avengers. He's written a ton for Marvel. He's written for Warhammer. Okay. He's written a bunch of graphic novels for that. He's written for Star Wars. I think what he's most known for is The Wicked and the Divine, which also had him collaborating with the artist that we see in Die, Stephanie Hans. Did some of those issues as well. So I just have a couple things up here for him, but don't let that fool you. If you look him up online, he's got a vast catalog of credits that he's worked on, basically all over the place. This is an industry veteran by any standard of the definition. So that's what we're looking at for Kieran Gillen. And I feel like even in this story, Stephanie Hans really deserves a lot of the credit because her images
the way she's kind of drawn them tells so much of the
Phenomenal.
story.
It's like storyboarding. It was fantastic.
And usually in this
Felt like
part,
everything was moving as you're reading
yeah,
it.
and usually in this part we just go into who wrote it. And we give them a lot of the credit for the story because they're putting the events together and controlling everything. But my God, her images tell a story on their own. I think some panels you don't even need the words. So fantastic stuff. Kieran Gillen, that's what we've got for him. Now I'm going to give it over to you for Breaking Story.
Let's do it. Now, my one thing for the graphic novel Die is character. More specifically, the smart choices the author makes to reveal character. Now, most people are probably familiar with the 2 Jumanji properties that came out recently. Very similar premise as we've mentioned. Now, in the Jumanji movies, the characters are thrust into the game and their personality is inserted into a body that basically plays against type. The cheerleader is going in the overweight middle-aged man. The weak and secure guy is getting Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, those properties are doing that because they're playing for the comedic effect, which they do to really great results in those films. But it's also a good way of showing character change and development across your story. Now, there's a different decision that they made in this book, which I actually liked better, which is where the characters pick their attributes and abilities before they enter into the game and begin to coexist in this kind of fantasy realm. Now, I like this because doing so is an extension of their egos. It manifests on the screen. And what I like even better about that is how we come to these characters 30 years later when they're 40 years old and they enter the game for a second time, still bound by the original choices they made when they were teenagers. This shows us how the characters have grown and changed, or not grown and changed at all. And it provides for an uncommon depth of character development for not just one main character, but 6 main characters in the pages of a graphic novel. That is an impressive feat.
Absolutely. Now tell me which character struck you.
Matt. Matt was my favorite.
The Grief Knight.
The Grief Knight.
Tell us about his power.
He's able to take emotion and transform it into power, which in the pages is basically a deadly sword that he can take on even the most lethal of dragons with. Any foe is not too great a foe for Matt when he's properly motivated with the emotional animus he needs to summon his powers.
Mm-hmm. Now,
what about you?
Yeah, I agree. Matt, I thought was... It's hard for me to pick one, to be honest with you.
I like them all.
Matt, the Grief Knight, certainly Ash, the Dictator, and the Dictator's abilities and how just poison it is to everybody. But
now explain Ash's abilities.
Ash's ability, he's the Dictator. So basically, he can control your emotions and your actions with his voice. That's his power. If he speaks something, suddenly you're under his or her.
He can make you feel how
Spell.
she wants you to feel. And this was a little bit weird because you call the character Ash. I think the character's name is Dominic.
It is. That's his
And
real
then-
name, but everyone calls him Ash.
Right, and when he enters into the game, he's a different gender. He's female.
Right.
So that's why
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other ability, Isabel,
I was going to bring her up.
the Godbinder.
Most interesting, I think.
Great.
The
Like, where have you
Godbinder
seen that?
ability.
She has the ability to manipulate these deities, each imbued with a significant power, upon whim. Whenever she kind of needs something, she has to barter with them and do these trade-offs, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Angela's the cyberpunk. What's interesting about her is that she has to collect what is the substance called gold fair.
Fair gold.
Fair gold,
Fair gold.
which supercharges all her abilities, but also has the downside of kind of transforming her into an addict, which I liked that and thought that was interesting. But Chuck don't have much. Chuck's just Chuck. He doesn't take anything seriously. He's kind of cavalier, and
He needs to act like a giant asshole.
The
crazy
fool.
asshole,
Yeah.
and then he's okay. He's the fool, so as long as he's doing something that's just dumbass stupid, he's going to be just fine.
that's right.
Now, Matt as the Grief Knight is kind of like the ultimate escalation. I think they have a few kind of battles where when things get out of hand, the last resort is to go over and make Matt feel like shit, and then he can just-
That's right.
he'll clear the board.
Let's
So-
make Matt cry.
Yeah.
We need to get out of
Yeah.
this one.
And-
But I like the choice they made with him because when you see him as a teenager, why is he filled with grief? His mother died an untimely death, and that's obviously weighing on him.
Yeah.
But the best choice I like that they made is when they bring him back, he's kind of happy with his life. He teaches statistics at a local university. He's not sad. He's not brooding. He seems to be pretty well adjusted, which is why it's painful for him to go back in there, to relive all this trauma, to be that emotional guy again at the expense of what he's built for himself.
And to your point, he's got one of the best stories in that 4th issue, The Inn. I think they're all having drinks around a table, and they ask him what the bravest thing he's ever done is.
Oh, this
and
is
he
fantastic.
And he lost his mother when she went under anesthesia for surgery.
Well,
and she was like,
it was a low risk
1 in
operation.
100,000, and it happened to her. She died. And then he's fast forward. He's got a daughter, and she's about to go through a similar operation under similar anesthesia, and then the odds are even less. And internally, he's just an absolute wreck. But he knows that with his daughter going into this operation, he has to present himself as being brave. Because if she does die, the last thing she'll remember is her dad being a nervous wreck or a coward, and he didn't want to have that happen.
He didn't want to have his child go out of the world feeling petrified. It's
incredible.
And he had an ability to change that. And he really conquered his fear, which is why he seems so well adjusted when he re-enters the world.
And issue number 2, I wanted to bring this up because I thought it was so smart. Issue number 2 is the players, and this is where we introduce everybody and who they are in the world of Die. And they do this with such a clever way in that they give them their enemy, the Fallen. The Fallen, like these flesh-eating monsters, and like as they're presented with this challenge, they go through their roster. You see everyone's abilities as well as their weaknesses, why they're hesitant to use them or not to. Angela's got a really interesting story in that she doesn't like powering up Pursuit or using her abilities because her last ability is her dog. And her dog died, I don't know if you caught this, like a day or two before
That's
she
why
went
she came to the
birthday.
party,
Yeah.
because she was down because
She
her
was
dog
feeling
died.
bad about her dog dying.
good
And
writing.
like it comes back and she hates it because at the end of the day, if she doesn't get more Faragold, she's going to lose the dog again. So she re-experiences
Open that
it.
wound all
Yeah.
over again.
It's incredible. There's so much good stuff here.
Well, on that note, let's get to Dead or Alive and let everybody know what our final thoughts are. All right, here we go. You ready to take this one?
Let's do it. Dead or Alive. Now, this is the first 5 issues, so it's kind of launching the story, and my old barometer for this is when I get done with those issues, am I dying to read issue number 6? And in the case of Die, this first volume, Fantasy Heartbreaker, the answer is absolutely. I was pissed off that I got done the 5th issue, and that was it. That was all I had in the volume. I was like, no. I have to read the 6th issue, because we'll talk about this in a minute, but the 5th issue ends in such an amazing cliffhanger. So many twists and turns.
That's why we're so hesitant to spoil it, even though there's spoilers in this review.
We've told you we're going to spoil it bad in a minute here. But yeah, this one is absolutely alive for me. I can't wait to go back to the world of Die and just see the outstanding, just gorgeous artwork of Stephanie Hans. I can't say enough about what she's done here.
Phenomenal.
The color palette, the reds that pop, the panels are just, I'd hang them on the wall all over the place if I could. Just outstanding work. This is a 9 out of 10 for me. It is alive. That is Die Volume 1, Fantasy Heartbreaker.
Fantastic. And it's alive for me as well. I'm going to pull it in at an 8 out of 10. High marks for me. Guys, do yourself a favor and check this out. This is really worth your time and effort to track one of these things down. I think I'm actually going to go look for it paperback just so I have it.
Yep.
I had a digital form, and that's how I originally read it, but I would look for that. This is adult fiction. We have characters that
Maybe we should specify that, but yes.
They have adult emotions and sophisticated logic and such nuance that this writer is a tremendous talent to conjure that type of depth and sophistication and render it consistently across all 6 characters is a unique thing. We don't have any cartoon characters. We don't have any archetypes. We have very well fleshed out, unique and interesting characters, bar none.
Kieran Gillen doesn't hide any of his influences here. Now, we've got an entire issue, the 3rd issue, Dungeons, where he talks about how the world is kind of a dungeon. And I love the last line about who goes to dungeons to fight, and better people than us.
Yep.
The ones willing to fight. And like so much of that is evocative of World War I and No Man's Land. The artwork there is stunning. But it even has an appearance by J.R.R. Tolkien in it.
Yep. In the trenches.
Right when I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I'm just like, oh, elves at war, this is kind of reminding me a little bit of. And then he walks around the corner basically knowing what you're thinking to address it in a very a very rewarding way. I thought it was just really well done.
And to comment further on that, this book really has a soul.
Yeah.
It's not cynical like so much fiction that we get these days. It's
Even
not
though
there to
these
shock.
characters are kind of depressed and miserable, these
Well,
broken adults.
They've reached that age where they've got a lot of grit under the fingers. They've been scarred by life to a certain extent, but they remember these things, especially from their youth, and then again later, and they still resonate. Like, they have respect when they say that line, "Well, better men than us. That's who goes out and fights." There's a soul here, and there's a bit of a moral stance, which I liked. It's a bold thing. It seems more trendy these days to be cynical and reject, traditional morals and storytelling to give you something that's shocking or just, I don't know what you'd call it, but inane and devoid of the kind of traditional merit. And this doesn't have it. It's got a real soul. These characters all have moral concerns, even when they're talking about the people of Glasstown, not wanting them to die. We all agree that we treat them all like people. Like, there's a soul, and there's a realistic moral boundaries that these characters have that only make it come across as more realistic and plausible.
And that gets us to that last issue, because so much is happening there in that 5th issue. I'm just so excited to even kind of break it down. The relationship between Ash and Solomon is really something, because I feel like we're about to get switched. I think Ash might be the true villain of this story, and he's our narrator.
Certainly seems.
His behavior at times is like
multiple times.
Yeah, so vile and so evil, and he's the one that kind of comes up with the plan. We'll destroy Glasstown to bring out Solomon, and then your friend that's been trapped here for 30 years,
who made the game for him on the birthday they shared, he's got some guilt on that.
Kills him. He kills him.
Mm-hmm.
He kills him dead, while the rest of them, it's got a great line in there where he looks at his friends and he sees strangers. Nobody's on board with him killing Solomon like that.
No.
And I was shocked when I read it too. I'm just like, well, this is a complete twist, but a good one. And I think, and I've been waiting to see like Ash kind of turn to go full dictator and to be that evil
threat.
threat.
It's foreshadowed, because oftentimes he's stopping himself saying, I don't trust myself in this place, what the things are that I might do, how I will manipulate people. Like, they foreshadow a little bit where he
and
doesn't...
it's so smart too, because that act is the last obstacle to them leaving, but no one's willing to go after he does it. Now Chuck has got his own reasons. Chuck likes being young again and strong and doing elf chicks.
That's right.
That's Chuck for us. We don't expect much from him, but Isabel, to your point, is treating everyone in the game like they're real people. Hint, hint. And says, we've got a humanitarian aid effort and it has to go take care of the people after they just destroyed her town. Mm-hmm. So by seemingly finding them a way out, saying it doesn't matter, you can hate me and judge me when we get back, he's made it impossible, and he's split the party. He's done the one thing that Solomon always told him never to do, is split the party.
That's right.
And then we go to the cool reveal that Solomon comes back as one of the fallen, and then we find out further that all of these fallen people, these dead ghouls that are kind of hunting them around this place, are real people that have been brought into the game. And when you die, you become fallen, but if you can kill a player, you get to play again. I mean,
gushy. Continue to gush. Guys, have you read this? Are you interested in reading it? Please leave your thoughts, leave your feedback, leave your comments down below. If you like this video, give us a thumbs. If you really like this video, please give us a subscription, and we will see you back on the next one.